There have been a couple of other stories about alleged accusers who also passed away, which are entirely not true. In the first place, one of those people was not an accuser. She was a stalker.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. Kevin Spacey has appeared on numerous major platforms recently to talk about his current predicament after a rough couple of years. Since 2022, the two-time Oscar-winning actor has faced a civil trial, a criminal trial, as well as a documentary that came out containing accusations of harassment, misconduct, and sexual assault. A couple of weeks ago on this channel, we looked at his interview with Dan Wooten, where he was asked case by case about the accusations from the documentary, and there was some really interesting stuff happening there. But in a more recent interview with Piers Morgan, they went into some different topics, and we saw some really interesting stuff with his facial expressions, body language, and word choice. That interview will be the focus of this analysis, and I want to start with a fun exercise, almost like a game. I'm going to play the first clip that we're going to look at today right now for you, but without any sound. You won't hear what he's saying. But just based on his nonverbal communication, I want you to try to identify the moment that he's saying something really important. Just using his body language, something that he really wants to make sure comes across very clearly. Try to see if you could identify that moment without knowing a thing he's saying. Take a look. Great, so I'm sure that a lot of the regular viewers and even some viewers who are joining us for the first time were able to identify a moment there based entirely on body language where he's really putting focus on something. So head down to the comments and let me know when you think that moment was. And you can either describe what you saw or give a timestamp and let me know what it is about his nonverbal communication that allowed you to figure out that he's saying something in that moment that's really important to him. Okay, now we're going to watch the same clip but with sound this time. And in this clip, he's talking about the first trial, the civil trial, where a young actor by the name of Anthony Rapp sued Spacey for sexual abuse. And his team was able to prove that the story that was being told could not have happened the way that it was being told. He's also talking about how when that accusation first came out and he publicly addressed it, this is when he chose to come out to the world and talk about his sexual orientation for the first time. And this is something he got a lot of criticism for. It's something that he has said numerous times. He regrets doing it that way, but he's starting by talking about that, then the trial. Take a look.
I accept that it was a poorly thought through statement. But again, I hope the fact that I'm not guilty of what I was accused of will, at least in hindsight, make people understand why I might have made it. And I also just would add that I hope that someday Anthony Rapp can accept that he had a faulty memory. That's what I would like to believe.
Have you had any
happened.
contact with him?
I have had no contact with him. But I would like to believe that at some point he'll recognize that with all the evidence that we presented at trial, which is why we were able to have the outcome that we did, that he will look back on this and say that his memory was faulty. And I think if he did that, that would go a long way to, I think, heal himself and also be healing for me.
Okay, so let's start with the big moment of emphasis, which I'm sure a lot of you caught even without knowing a single thing about what he's talking about. And it has a lot to do with the eyebrows. So we often talk about the eyebrows on the channel, more specifically the eyebrow flash. When the eyebrows go up in a conversation, there's a ton of research on this. I'll leave some links in the description. But usually if socially you see the eyebrows go up, it's either surprise, social connection, or emphasizing something. So the moment we're talking about is when he says, I'm not guilty of what I'm being accused of. And the eyebrows aren't the only thing we see in that moment. We also see this upwards gesture with the chin as he approaches Piers. So he's approaching as the eyebrows go up to make sure this is being registered. We also see that his illustrators are perfectly synced with the language. So illustrators are the gestures we use to illustrate what we're saying, to emphasize what we're saying. And in that moment, even if you can't hear it, you see that it's moving with the rhythm of his words. I am not guilty.
That I'm not guilty of what I was accused of.
Also, and this is harder to see than it is to hear, his speech slows down. Now, some of you may have caught that even without hearing it because you could see the lips moving at a certain rhythm and then they slow down. So you could see that slowness, but when you hear it, it's blatantly obvious. He slows down and pauses. I am not guilty. So really putting emphasis on that moment. Now, we did talk about this in the previous analysis of Kevin Spacey, but it's worth reiterating because it's very important for his baseline that he is very animated with his eyebrows. And this is something that's very common for actors, particularly stage actors and performers. There is research that suggests that when we're looking at someone's face, we subconsciously give even more importance to the eyebrows than to the eyes. And as a stage performer, I know that my 100th row may not see what my eyes are doing, but they could definitely see what my eyebrows are doing, even from all the way back there. We've used the eyebrows to communicate non-verbally for a very long time. So Spacey uses those eyebrows to emphasize a lot. And if you look at his sentences and when those eyebrows go up, it often lines up with important things that he wants to make sure come across, which definitely lines up with how we use eyebrow flashes in the research. Now, there's another one in this segment, and it happens when he's talking about how he hopes that Anthony Rapp will realize that he has a faulty memory when it comes to this event.
That he had a faulty memory.
And it was really interesting to see his outlook on that trial and Anthony Rapp, because a lot of people in the same situation would villainize the person who started these chains of events, right? And say he was a liar, he lied in court, he started, all these accusations, because that's really the starting point of this whole mess. But that's not what we're really getting from Kevin Spacey here. He's not saying the guy lied, the guy made it up or anything like that. He's saying that the guy just had a faulty memory and he hopes for his healing and his healing that one day he'll be able to come to terms with the fact that he had a faulty memory. This is also a slight hint that indicates that Kevin Spacey has the capacity to look at evidence and be introspective, because that's what he's expecting from this person, and saying, I hope he'll look at the evidence and realize that he has a faulty memory. Almost hinting that in a similar situation, that's what he would do. He would look at the evidence and go, okay, I might be remembering it this way, but here's some evidence, it may have actually gone down this way. Very often when we talk about our expectations of other people, we're subtly telling people how we operate. So there's a bit of a clue there. All right, now we're going to look at more controversial topics, a very controversial accusation, and a bunch of really great nonverbal communication. But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content.
So what was the old Kevin Spacey like when you're being critical about what you were like before the ground zero of that day in October 2017? When you look at yourself critically, what was that person like?
I think as much as I tried to be a good human being, I think that there were bouts with arrogance, there were bouts with my ego, there were bouts with, I look back at times when I think, wow, I wasn't as kind as I could have been, I wasn't as generous as I could have been, I wasn't as prepared as I could have been. I look back now at I was so focused and determined on what happened on stage and in front of a screen that I missed a lot of things that were happening off screen and off stage. And now I'm enormously grateful that my focus has shifted. My goal is no longer to be the best actor, which it was. My goal is now to prove that I'm a man of good character.
There is a pattern that we're seeing with his eyes with almost every question in this interview. I've seen him do it before as well, but it's really reliable in this interview. So after almost every question, we see his eyes go up like this to his right, and very often in that same moment we see a flutter, which is when we blink very rapidly in succession, and then he either comes down and looks at Piers and answers the question, or for more emotional questions that are getting him emotionally involved, he looks down. So let's talk about eye direction. You will see a lot of social media commenters or certain articles who will tell you that whenever somebody looks up and to the right, they're really recalling something, and when somebody goes up and to the left, they're making something up. And this applies to every human being. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I'm a mentalist. I have been for over 15 years doing hundreds of shows a year, And I promise you, I've spent more time than almost anyone alive staring at the faces of people who are either thinking of a real memory or making one up. It's literally my job, because then I tell the audience what this memory was and who was there with them and what they're seeing and all these details, and I blow minds. That's what I do. And as such, I could promise you there is no pattern. There isn't somewhere we all look when we're really thinking of a memory that happened and somewhere that we all look when we're making it up. Everyone's different. So this pattern we're seeing with Kevin Spacey, that's for Kevin Spacey. We can't go apply this to everyone else. So what it seems here is that whenever he's asked a question, he takes a second to kind of formulate his thought, and we often break eye contact when we do that to close off distractions. Some people close their eyes, some people look down, some people, rub their foreheads as they look away. There's a lot of different people who do it in different ways. But he looks up like this. This is also very consistent with that flutter that we see a lot in the beginning of his answers, because the research shows that universally, everywhere in the world, we use these eye flutters to either commit something to memory or retrieve something from memory. So he takes that second, he thinks of what he's going to say here, or at least the beginning, and then he either re-engages to present the answer, or the thought gets him emotional, so he goes down to that emotional space, which makes perfect sense with all these behaviors. Another moment here that solidifies the meaning of these gestures for him is when he says, I look back at times, and as he says that, his eyes go up to that same place as he's saying, I look back at times. So as he's talking about reflection, as he's talking about that moment he takes to reflect, we're seeing that same gesture, which lines up with what we see at the beginning of these answers. There's a moment there that I'm sure a lot of the regular viewers caught. High fives if you did. It's when he says that there was arrogance, there was ego, and as he says ego, we see the one corner of the mouth go up like this, and we see a scrunching on the face as he says ego.
There were bouts with my ego, there were bouts with...
Now, there is a caveat here. There are moments where, as Kevin Spacey is talking naturally about nothing emotionally loaded, his mouth kind of just goes to the right like this really fast. But it's not that pronounced, not as much as the moment where he said ego. In the moment where he said bouts with my ego, it's not just that his mouth kind of went off to the side like this, it's that it went up. The corner of that mouth really went up, and we saw a big line on the side of his nose. Really, really hard to miss. Of the universal emotions, these are the emotions that are expressed the same way pretty much everywhere in the world, across cultures. There's only one that is asymmetric, meaning we only see it on one side of the face. And it's contempt, which means feeling a little superior or looking down on something. And it's characterized by a scrunching on one side of the mouth. So one corner of the mouth is going to go up, and we're going to see a line on that side. So sometimes it looks like this, and sometimes it looks like this. And it's often combined with this kind of moving the head away, and often with this kind of side eye. Now I want to make sure to clarify, because people often misunderstand the statement. I'm not saying that contempt is the only asymmetric expression that we ever see on someone's face. It's just the only one that is innate to human beings and that we see all over the world, and all cultures would recognize it. So again with Kevin Spacey, every now and then as he's talking, the mouth just kind of shoots to the right like this. But in that case, it's going up, it's causing that line on one side of the face, and also as he's saying it, his head is kind of jerking to the side. So can it be part of his baseline to where his mouth does that every now and then? It can, but because of the fact that it's really going up and the head is jerking at the same time, I do feel like there's a moment of contempt there towards the way that he used to behave. However, if we focus on the specific answer, we'll notice that there's a little bit of distancing, because Piers Morgan is asking about, talk to us about the old Kevin. How were you before all this came to light? And he knows that this interview is about the allegations, what he's been going through. And in this answer, he doesn't really address that. He doesn't talk about the accusations and his behaviors, specifically in a flirty context, and how they could have been inappropriate at times. So his mind doesn't go there, and he doesn't address that. But what is interesting is that we are getting quite a bit of detail about the answer, even if it's not addressing the topic at hand. So he shifts the topic, but still talks a lot about these reflections that he does. Because it would have been easy for him to go, I was arrogant, I had a big ego, so I'm trying to work on that. But there's really a sense here of the time he's taking to reflect on those behaviors and the things that he's trying to change. So it's a really interesting answer, because we're getting a lot of details and indications of reflection, but about something different than the topic that we're here to talk about. And by the way, that's neither a positive nor a negative thing. Keep in mind, I'm just talking about focus and behaviors. So in this moment, I truly do believe that he's taken the time to reflect about his arrogance and his ego. And he may have thought about how that affected his behaviors when it came to flirting or his romantic life. But in this moment, he's not putting the focus on that. He's focusing more on his character as a person. Speaking of which, there's a really interesting gesture at the end when he says that his goal is no longer to be the best actor, which it was. And we see two things in that moment. One, we see the eyebrows come down, and two, the hand comes up like this in a fist. And eyebrows down can mean a lot of things. It could mean reflection, it could mean anger, it could mean frustration, it could mean defensive. It rarely means something positive. It's very rare that with positivity, the eyebrows would go down. And the same thing could be said for the fingers coming into a fist. Now, in moments of celebration, we often see this, but it's often moments of celebration of strength. Like, yes, I did it, I'm so strong. Often. These two gestures together, that fist, the eyebrows down, especially that little jiggle in the fist like this, is a communication of power, of strength. And I think in that moment, he's saying that's what it takes to be a great actor. Maybe it means it's a tough industry, so to be a great actor, you gotta be tough. And he's contrasting that with trying to be a man of good character, which he might think takes a little bit more softness, a bit more delicateness.
Was Los Angeles masseurs who didn't want to be named, claimed that you had groped him at a house in Malibu in California, sued you for sexual gender violence, battery, assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress and false imprisonment, and then died before the legal action reached court. What do you want to say about that? Because as you know, social media was ablaze after that. This was all obviously a sinister thing. Maybe this guy had been shut up, blah, 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 the usual
yes.
stuff.
Well, they're actually...
But in terms of the legality of the case,
Right.
what is your response to it?
My response to it is that we had irrefutable evidence to show that I wasn't even in the state of California when he made this accusation had occurred. And we were very confident that we were going to be able to present, as we have in other cases, that evidence. And, we found out from his family that he had cancer prior to filing that civil suit, and he died of cancer. And, it was sad, but we never had the opportunity to go in front of the court and to prove our innocence. There have been a couple of other stories about alleged accusers who also passed away,
Right.
which are entirely not true. In the first place, one of those people was not an accuser. She was a stalker, and in fact stalked me for many years, sent white powder in the mail to the Old Vic Theater, called in bomb threats to the Old Vic Theater. We had to evacuate the theater on a number of occasions, and threatened my life. And she was arrested, charged, and convicted in a court in the United States and served more than 4 years in prison. And when she got out of prison, she started making more threats. And it was being examined by the court whether she was going to go back to prison when she was hit by a car and died of her injuries. And there was someone else who had told a funny story about having had an encounter with me in which I made a pass at him. He told it in a very jokey way. And then sadly, he'd been an individual who had a lot of issues and a lot of substance abuse, and he was fighting back and talking about mental health. And he had a book that he'd written. And in that radio interview, he told this story. A year later, when he sadly took his own life, someone then said that he'd accused me of this, that he was a victim, and there was no court case with him. There was no court case with this woman who was a stalker. So this is just internet, conspiracy theories.
Okay, I love me a good conspiracy theory. So in this one, he's being asked about the guy who died after having accused him, and a bunch of people on the internet said, oh my God, he had him killed. Oh my God, obviously he had him killed. Of course, because somebody accused him and then died, so nothing else can explain those two events. Okay, look, I often say on the channel that in interrogations or in interviews, when an answer is provided, we ask ourselves, did that answer my question, and did it answer my entire question? And in this case, not only did it answer the question, not only did it answer the entire question, but he elaborated on the question and answered that as well, once again showing his priority. He starts off by saying that they have irrefutable evidence that he wasn't even in the state that this would have happened at the time that it would have happened. Now, to 98% of people out there, that would be more than enough, because he's going, I had nothing to worry about with this guy. We had this evidence that I wasn't even in that state. And at the end of his answer there, I would have done an analysis and said, okay, well, that seems like it clears him of ever having done that thing, but it doesn't technically clear him of having anything to do with the person's death. But still, to most people, it would have been enough. I have proof that I wasn't even there. But in this answer, he keeps going. And he talks about how the guy had cancer. That's what he died from. So unless he had this guy killed and faked an autopsy, I don't know. But he's saying, it had come out even before that the guy had cancer. That's what he died from. He gives that information as well. And he's not only ending there, he himself is volunteering to address 2 other cases where people passed away after having issues with him. So I recognize this type of answer to where you build on something so much because you're aching to just get it off your chest. And it happens a lot with people who are in the public eye, and I felt it myself before. Now, of course, I'm not in the public eye to this scale. I will never be. But I know that sometimes when there's something that's really, really misinterpreted, I can't wait for an opportunity to just spit it out. So if something related comes up, I'm not going to stop there. I'm going to go the extra mile and go, by the way, people are saying this. Here's why that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we often talk about psychological distancing. This is almost psychological approaching, right? Instead of avoiding the topic and trying to change the subject, he's leaning into the subject and going, not just this guy, but there was that other one, and here's what was happening there. Notice how when he's talking about the lady and saying she wasn't an accuser, she was a stalker, we see the exact same cluster of emphasis that we saw earlier. So with the eyebrows, the head gesturing forward, that hand with a slurred speech. She was a stalker.
Was not an accuser. She was a stalker.
Then he goes on to talk about how some of her behavior was questionable to the point where she went to jail for 4 years. And then he talks about the last guy. Now, I do really quickly want to talk about over-specificity. There's a lot to say, and we've talked about it elsewhere on the channel, but on occasion, somebody who's guilty about something or holding some information in get really, really overly specific with an answer around the subject. So they give you all these details about unrelated things because they feel like they're getting truth credit. So somebody might look at this and go, there's a lot of detail here. But for one thing, it's not that far off baseline. We're not getting that much more detail. But second and more importantly, it's on topic. We're getting these details pertaining to the actual accusation, not as a way to sidetrack and build truth around it without addressing it. So look, if we put behavioral analysis aside for 1 second, then just look at this from a critical thinking standpoint or just logical standpoint. Is it possible that Kevin Spacey had something to do with the deaths of these 3 people? It's possible, but let's think about it. Why these 3 people, right? And why end there? There are so many other people who have accused him in the documentary, in the criminal trial, who were identified and who were confirmed. He knew them, he worked with them, which makes such stronger accusations against him than a masseuse he met once, some woman that never accused him of anything, and a guy who kind of seemingly jokingly accused them of a couple of things. These are not his worst threats or his biggest accusers. So why would he have these people killed and then not those people? So I think this is a case of a lot of people out there like an exciting narrative. Oh my God, something's going on here. 3 people who had dealings with Kevin Spacey have died. It's gotta be correlated. And a lot of people out there don't understand that correlation doesn't always mean causation. So yes, 3 people who have died had some sort of experience with Kevin Spacey, but it takes a lot more than that to constitute evidence that Kevin Spacey was the cause of those deaths. This kind of thing is called arguing from a conclusion, and it's the polar opposite of analysis. It's where you start with a conclusion, which is Kevin Spacey had people killed, then you look for things that support that argument, as opposed to looking at the facts and forming sound conclusions. So is it possible that he had 3 people killed? Yes. Is it likely? Far from it.
All of a sudden, there's some activity happening next to me and kind of glance over, and Kevin's just pleasuring himself. You know, some of the most horrific war footage ever recreated. Like, there's no way that this is happening, that this guy is rubbing one out during the invasion of Normandy. And finally, he reaches over and grabs my hand and tries to get me to help out. I was like, no, this is crazy.
So he's a gigantic Marine who presumably has fought in wars. But there are some salient points about this. Apparently you've never seen Saving Private Ryan.
No, I haven't.
So why is he saying this?
I mean, my last question, did he get paid for telling this story? I don't know. What I do know is that he claimed that this incident at the movies happened in 1998. I have an email from him in 2011. I have an email from him in 2013, in which he's, not only in the 2011 one, says how great it was to see me when I was just in Los Angeles. And I know I'd gone to Los Angeles at some point during the tour of Richard III. We apparently went to a play together, and he looked forward to seeing me again soon in the future.
I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I really wanted to include this clip because in the previous analysis of Kevin Spacey, we talked about this specific individual and this specific accusation before it had even come out, before we'd even seen the guy. So Kevin Spacey had received an email about this documentary in which they mentioned who this guy was, but we hadn't seen him. And in that analysis, I talked about some guesses that I have about this person and the type of person that they are. And seeing this clip and seeing that email that was shown at the end only solidified that so much more. So first of all, if we look at the guy, his stature, the way he's sitting, the way he's put together, the way he talks, if we see that email that Kevin Spacey showed at the end, this is obviously someone who is very comfortable with the attention. In fact, if we go back and look at the first analysis I did and the story, the way he told it about his experience with Kevin Spacey, it was pretty obvious that a lot of what he was doing was to try to work with Kevin Spacey to end up in one of his movies or a collaboration to some extent. As for the incident in the movie theater, again, you guys can go back and look at the previous analysis. We went into great depth as to why I say this, but Kevin Spacey saying he hasn't seen Saving Private Ryan doesn't deny the whole thing, and this guy telling the story the way it happened doesn't confirm the whole thing. So memory is flawed. We're talking about decades ago. Kevin Spacey even earlier in this interview acknowledged that memory is flawed, so he knows that. So look, it could very well be that it wasn't that specific movie, because Kevin Spacey never denied the behaviors. He denied seeing the movie. So could have been a different movie. The guy is just misremembering it. It could be that this never happened, but Kevin Spacey has acknowledged that behaviors of this type, of what the guy accused him of, are along the lines of things he would have done. Very direct, often inappropriate. So it's a very weird gray area. So I maintain and always have that I believe that there was a time where Kevin Spacey did a lot of inappropriate things and made a lot of people extremely uncomfortable. And he should reflect on those, he should answer those, but also in both trials so far, he's been found innocent. And in the media, a lot of people love to talk about the accusations, but we don't hear so much about the fact that he was found innocent in all the trials for all the charges. So do I for sure believe that nothing like this happened just because he's saying he's never seen Saving Private Ryan? No. To me, the denial isn't strong enough to believe that. Again, could have been a different movie. And I believe that this is along the lines of something that he could have done. But with this guy, I maintain that the fact that they kept in touch, the fact that he wanted to work with him, the fact that in the other video we saw, he went to a party with him after this event. So all these things would indicate that even if something did happen, and it might have, it wasn't enough for this guy to go, oh my God, I don't want to be anywhere near this person. So yeah, again, gray area. I want you to look at Kevin Spacey's behaviors while he's watching the clip of this guy, because there is a lot going on, and it's a great example of why we look for clusters of behavior, right? Because one thing could be anything, right? Someone starts blinking more, maybe there's something in their eye, maybe there was a gust in the room, we don't know. But when a lot of things start to happen, now we start asking some questions. Why is there such a shift in so many behaviors in one moment? And there is a lot in this one. And again, if you guys want to keep this interactive, you can go back and look at it, go down to the comments, let me know what you saw. And you know what? I'm sure there's even more than this. We're seeing a lip lick right in the beginning, licking the lips, which again, that's a great example of just one thing is meaningless, right? Because maybe your lips dry out or whatever, you're just licking your lips, but it's the cluster that matters. It's all of these together. Then we have, he fixes the suit. So that's a grooming gesture. When we're self-aware, we tend to do these little things to fix our image because we're aware that we're being watched. Then he fixes the tie almost immediately after, which is another grooming gesture, and he looks away. We call this exit checking. So he might have a manager or something behind the camera. He's looking to them. But anyways, he's directing his attention away from what's going on. After the exit check, we see him look down as he retreats in his chair and he closes up. His hands come together. His entire body closes up. We also see a deep exhale with puffed cheeks. And then he looks down and he starts picking lint off his shirt, which again is a big thing we pay attention to. It's a grooming gesture that's really obvious. It's like I'm really minding the way I look, and it gives me something to do, kind of distract away from the situation. So what does all that mean in an interview or interrogation setting? All it means is if I saw all these things at the same time, I'll make a note that around this topic, something's going on. Something's causing stress. Is he hiding something? Is this whole thing making him stressful because of the accusation? We can't know. We're not psychics, but there's something about this. So after the clip, if I saw that, I would say, Mr. Spacey, how do you feel towards this? How do you feel watching that? I might even be a little more direct and go, now, this is making you a little uncomfortable. Would you care to tell us why? Essentially, all it does is it gives me a clue that something here is causing stress or discomfort, and I just want to go into that and pry it open a little bit.
I mean, if you'd asked me in 2015, maybe even if you'd asked me in 2002, did I know a guy named Jeffrey Epstein? I probably would have said no. Well, of course, I have since learned who he is, and I have since been able to go back and find out that the airplane that we flew on for this humanitarian mission was owned by Jeffrey Epstein. And to then learn, oh, he was actually on some of those flights. And this Maxwell woman was on some of those flights. I didn't know him. I've never spent any time with him. I was with the Clinton Foundation people. That's who I was with. Now, what I understand is that he didn't start to be investigated until 2005 by authorities in Florida. So here's what I can tell you. This Maxwell woman, she was one of many people who sat down next to me in that throne room. I have no relationship with her. I had no relationship with him. I mean, he's not my friend. I'm not a confidant. I've never spent time with him.
Okay, so we're going to have a bit of a debate on this one. There's going to be a bit of a debate, and I'm curious to know what you guys are going to think, because I've certainly gone back and forth. So there's a whole story he tells you about how he went on this humanitarian mission with President Clinton, and during that trip, they went to England, and he was sitting in a throne room, and all these people were taking pictures with him, and they're having a good time. And there's a picture of him with Ghislaine Maxwell, and he says that he doesn't remember meeting her. It's just that at that event, there was all these pictures being taken, and they happened to take that picture. He also says that he later found out that the plane they were using on this trip was Jeffrey Epstein's, and he may have been on that plane with Ghislaine Maxwell. So a few things here. In a denial, I want to see a direct denial, and we get one here. I didn't know him. I've never spent any time with him, and in that moment, we're really not seeing much that I could point to tell you, okay, there's something going on here, some kind of cluster. It's a pretty direct denial. There is a shrug there, but it's, both shoulders. I don't know him, don't know what to tell you. I didn't know the guy. So typically when we lack confidence, it's a little more asymmetric. It's more of an illustrator rather than a real lack of knowledge. But there are two things outside of that denial that I want to talk about, and one of them is the debate that I mentioned in the recent present. So both times that he talks about Ghislaine Maxwell, he refers to her as this Maxwell woman.
And this Maxwell woman was on some of those flights. This Maxwell woman, she was one of many people who sat down next to me in that throne room.
Now, in almost any case, if I saw that, where he goes, Jeffrey Epstein and this Maxwell woman, I would tell you it's psychological distancing, right? Like if I was talking about this interview and you would ask me if I've ever met Kevin Spacey, I'm talking, I go, that Spacey guy, it's odd. It's Kevin Spacey. Everyone knows who that is. So the fact that he's not using her first name and this Maxwell woman almost seems dismissive, seems like it's psychological distancing. And I could still believe that that's what it means. But there's a caveat here that makes it really, really interesting. And it's the fact that a lot of people, and I've experienced this firsthand, have no idea how to pronounce her first name. I've heard it butchered on the media, in the news. I've heard people pronounce it wrong, or there's even been debate on how you're supposed to pronounce it, and I understand why. I live in a French-speaking province, Quebec. I was raised here my entire life. And if you showed me that name, I would be a little confused. I would either pronounce it Guylaine or Ghislaine. Because here's the thing, Guylaine is a name, but I've often seen it spelled with a G-U, like Guillaume or guillotine. That's the G sound. So if it was G-U, no question, Guylaine. With the H spelling, I've seen both. I've seen Guylaines who spell it that way and Ghislaines who spell it that way. So it's very confusing. It could be either one. Take that and add to it the fact that phonetically both those words are not extremely obvious, and you have a result where I've often heard people either call her Jeffrey Epstein's wife or that Maxwell woman, or, they kind of, Maxwell. So kind of just mutter it because they're not really sure what to do with that. So I could buy either one. It can be psychological distancing of him trying to put distance between him and this Maxwell woman, whatever, I barely know her. But it can also just be him having read that name before and having no clue how to pronounce it. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. I honestly don't think we could get the answer just by this. I honestly think either theory is valid. Like if one of you says, I really think he's psychologically distancing, I'll agree with you. And if one of you says, no, it's just because he doesn't know how to pronounce that name, I wouldn't know how to pronounce it either, I'll agree with you as well. I don't think we have enough data to know with certainty which one it is. So let's try to limit the for sures and the absolutely's. And just, with your gut, is there one you're leaning more towards? And then the other thing I took note of is right at the end, it's the type of overspecificity that I often talk about on the channel as being important, because he goes, I have no relationship with her, I have no relationship with him. The sentence could have ended there, but we see this hesitation as he bounces his head to the side. He goes, like he's gonna clarify, and he goes, he's not my friend, he's not my confidant, I've never spent time with him. So it's almost like he's amending the statement that I have no relationship with him, and clarifying and saying, he's not my friend, he's not my confidant, and I haven't spent time with him.
I have no relationship with her. I had no relationship with him. He's not my friend. I'm not a confidant. I've never spent time with him.
It seems like he's saying I have no relationship with him, but what I actually mean is this. So I feel like there was maybe a little more to it than just I've been on his plane, because if Bill Clinton was gonna bring him on Jeffrey Epstein's plane and Jeffrey Epstein was there, I think logically it makes sense that he would have said, hey, Jeffrey, this is Kevin, this is Jeffrey. They might have had a chat while they were on there. So I think what he's saying here is that I definitely don't have a relationship with her whatsoever. I don't have a relationship with him, but what I mean by that is we weren't friends. He wasn't my confidant. I didn't spend a lot of time with him, but there may have been some type of relationship. There's a caveat to the relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, but not with Ghislaine Maxwell.
The person I'm told has been very supportive to you in the royal family is actually the king when he was Prince Charles. Is that true?
That is true.
And when your troubles started, when the scandal blew up, he did reach out to you?
No, I haven't heard from him directly, no.
But through other people?
That may be true.
Come on, Kevin, you'll know whether that's true or not.
Well,
he's now the king of England.
I do, but when you start paying your guests, Piers, then you're gonna get the.
But he did contact you.
No, he did not contact me directly. No.
But he sent a message to you.
I heard a message, yes, and I'm very, very grateful for that.
A message of support.
Yes.
That must have meant a lot to you.
Yeah, but look, I don't want to drag him into all this. He's.
Well, many people think it was a good thing for him to do.
Well, I'm not saying it isn't. I'm just saying that he's got a lot on his plate, and I wish him the very best.
But it was a message he wanted you to hear.
I can't tell you what he was intending.
I really wanted to play this clip because I've been critical of Piers Morgan as an interviewer. He's often criticized as an interviewer for being a little blunt, a little direct, a little pushy at times, and that is true. He often is that way, and there have been times where I thought it was a little too much, but I have to give credit where credit is due, and here we're seeing a very experienced interviewer doing something that only an experienced interviewer would know to do or would catch. So he's talking about King Charles and his support for Kevin Spacey, and when he first asked the question if he heard from him, Kevin Spacey answers in saying that he didn't directly hear from him. And Piers catches that, because Kevin is saying, no, I haven't heard from him directly. No. So that sounds like a denial, but there's a subtlety there, the word directly, and Piers instantly catches it. And he goes, but through other people? So we haven't directly heard from him, but through other people. And if we look at Kevin Spacey's answer, we do see a cluster of deception because he looks down as he goes, so he stumbles on his words. He needs a second there to come up with the right answer. And he goes, that may be true, which is a very weak statement. It's also an absence of denial. He's not saying, no, that didn't happen. It's that may be true. So a very weak statement there in terms of confidence. And right at the end of that, we see a small smile as he's looking at Piers.
No, I haven't heard from him directly, no.
But through other people?
That may be true.
And some people might call that duping delight or duper's delight. It goes by both names. And it's a slight smile that we see on people who are being deceptive. It's about the knowledge of being deceptive, and sometimes it just slips through. So it could be that, or it could be just him giving a pleasant little smile at the Piers saying, that's all you're going to get out of me. But either way, Piers sees that there's a lot going here, and he calls him out on that. Now, I don't know if I would be that direct about it and saying, come on, Kevin, you know whether that's true or not. I mean, this is the king we're talking about. So he's kind of very upfront about the fact that he knows something's being hidden there. But nonetheless, we're seeing an interviewer here who instantly realized that that one word directly created a caveat, and he dug into that. And then the answer still had a lot of stress around it, so he dug into that. So although it is that Piers Morgan directness, we are seeing his experience here. Then Kevin Spacey tries to derail a little with a joke by saying, if you paid your guests, then maybe you would get the answers you want. Tries to kind of lighten the mood and get off the topic. Piers doesn't allow it. He kind of scoffs at it really quick and gets right on the topic. So yeah, again, this is just someone who has so much experience doing this, doing his job and trying to get this information out. But I do find it really interesting how Kevin Spacey is standing his ground here, because a lot of people would go, yeah, I have the support of the king. They would really ride that wave and saying it felt amazing to have the support of the king. It really made me feel like there's a lot of important people in my corner. They would find a way to capitalize on that, but he's really insisting in saying, no, I don't want to talk about that. Don't want to go into details. I just want to keep him out of this whole thing.
How supportive was your co-star?
I haven't heard from Robin.
At all?
No.
Nothing? Since when?
Since September or October of 2017.
She went on to carry on with the show,
She did.
making a lot of money from a show which you helped make one of the biggest shows in the world.
She did. She deserves everything that she's been offered. She's an extraordinary talent.
Would you like to see her? Would you like her to contact?
I adore Robin, and I think that the thing that made me have so much of a good time on that show was making Robin laugh. And we laughed every day.
And then she stabbed you in the back.
No, I will not let you get away with that. Absolutely not.
I'm suggesting.
I reject your suggestion.
Well, I don't know, you know. I have a different view.
She is a wonderful person.
I know
and a
her.
wonderful actress.
I know her.
And it was a very
But the
difficult
fact she's
time.
never once made any attempt to contact you, I find extraordinary.
That's all right. You can judge it if you choose to. I'm not
Well,
judging it. I'm trying to be understanding.
I know her a bit. I'm just very surprised that that is the case. It seems extraordinary to me.
I wanted to leave that clip there because, like the King Charles example, I found this to be interesting as well, because they're talking about his co-star on House of Cards, and Piers seems to be saying, it's kind of crummy of her to just abandon you when all this stuff came up, when you guys had a close relationship, and even goes as far as saying that she stabbed you in the back. And we see a lot of stop gestures coming from Kevin Spacey, so that's when the hand comes up like this. And hand orientation is not universal. We see different orientations in different cultures, but pretty much everywhere in the world, the hand coming up like this is a negation, to stop to get someone's attention. We often use it in greetings as well, but it's that same idea of stopping someone to greet them. So this is pretty much a negation everywhere in the world, and we're seeing it there. He's going, no, I will not let you get away with that. He's putting a firm foot down in saying, look, you can judge her if you want to, but all I see is a tremendously talented actress, and just because she didn't reach out to me, I'm not going to judge that. That's her business. Just like King Charles, that's his business. He's essentially refusing to tally who's on his side and who's against him in this entire thing. I think he sees this as his own problem. He really talks a lot about the reflections and the growth and the fact that he understands why a lot of his behaviors are unacceptable. So I feel like he feels like this is a personal journey and doesn't want to involve other people in this mess, whether they're on his side or not. Which makes it a great point to wrap this whole analysis up. In my first analysis, I said that I believe that he exhibited a lot of inappropriate behaviors, and where that line is different for everyone. So by some people's standards, he crossed the line. By his own, it seems like he feels it was inappropriate, it was wrong. He's willing to have those conversations, and he's admitting that he will not be doing any of those things again, but I don't think he believes that it was quite criminal. And so far, the justice system agrees. 2 trials, a parade of accusations, and none of it stuck. And I'm not saying that the man's a saint by any means. I'm not saying that we should completely forget everything that happened, but for the man to be up to his ears in debt, completely canceled, not able to work at all, feels like a bit of an exaggeration to someone who hasn't been found guilty of anything in a courtroom. But I want to make it very clear that that's just my opinion, one person's opinion. When I point out nonverbal behaviors, that's just me bringing my experience to point a few things out for your consideration to form your own opinion based on those things. And I would never want any of my viewers to think that I'm presenting my opinion as a fact. I'm not. It's just my opinion based on these behaviors that we're seeing. And as such, I would love to get your opinion as well. Let me know, as always, in the comments what you think of this situation, what you thought of this video, and I'll see you on the next one.